Imagine a juicy, sizzling steak on your plate, or mouth-watering BBQ skewers at a picnic. Now picture a huge red sign appearing right next to that image, screaming, "Causes cancer." Sounds like something straight out of a tabloid, doesn't it? But that's exactly the kind of headline that rocked the world a few years ago, sparking panic among meat lovers everywhere. So, is it time to switch to carrots and say goodbye to your favorite dishes? Or is it just another scare story blown completely out of proportion? Today we're not going to beat around the bush. We'll dive into all the facts, all the studies, and all the buts, and finally get to the bottom of the question: is red meat truly a direct path to cancer? I promise by the end of this video, you'll have a clear and definitive answer. This whole story kicked off in 2015. That's when the International Agency for Research on Cancer, part of the World Health Organization, released its famous report. They analyzed over 800 scientific papers and delivered a verdict that hit like a bolt from the blue. But to truly understand their findings, we first need to clarify what exactly we're talking about. Let's kick things off by defining what scientists actually mean by red meat. You might think the answer is straightforward. If it looks red, it's red. But it's actually a bit more nuanced than that. When the World Health Organization refers to red meat, they're talking about the meat from all mammals. This category includes beef, veal, lamb, mutton, goat, and perhaps surprisingly, pork. Yes, I know many people are used to thinking of pork as the other white meat, thanks to some old advertising campaigns. However, from a biochemical and nutritional standpoint, pork is unequivocally red meat. It earns this classification due to its high concentration of a specific protein called myoglobin. Myoglobin is responsible for delivering oxygen to muscles. The more active a muscle is, the more myoglobin it contains, and consequently, the redder the meat appears. Chicken, turkey, other poultry, and fish, however, are a completely different story. They're not included in this particular classification. So, a simple rule of thumb to remember is this: if it walked on 4 legs, it's red meat. This basic understanding will be very helpful as we delve deeper. Okay, so what is processed meat? And here's where it gets really interesting, because it's not all the same, and that difference is crucial. Processed meat is any meat that has been altered through various processes, typically to enhance its flavor or extend its shelf life. Think of it not just as a raw cut, but as a product derived from meat. These processes include salting, smoking, curing, fermenting, or adding preservatives. Simply put, if you see items like sausages, hot dogs, ham, bacon, salami, any kind of deli meat, or canned meat on the shelves, that's all considered processed meat. Even popular dishes like shashlik, if pre-marinated at a factory in a complex sauce containing preservatives, can fall into this category. Here's the key takeaway: a homemade patty you make from fresh ground meat is simply red meat. But a factory-produced sausage, even if made from the same meat, but with added salt, nitrites, and other additives, is processed meat. Please keep that distinction in mind, because this crucial difference is at the root of all the current discussion and concern. And soon, we'll delve into why this is so critically important. Now, for the really important part. In its report, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, or IARC for short, classified processed meat as a Group 1 carcinogen. This is the most serious category, officially labeled carcinogenic to humans. This means scientists have gathered enough compelling evidence to conclude that consuming processed meat causes colorectal cancer, which is cancer of the colon and rectum. Sounds like a death sentence, doesn't it? When the average person hears something like that, they immediately picture a sausage sandwich as being almost on par with a cigarette. After all, this very same group contains substances and factors whose dangers are universally acknowledged. Things like tobacco smoke, asbestos, plutonium, alcohol, and solar radiation. News of this finding spread like wildfire around the world. Headlines screamed, "Who equates bacon to plutonium, and sausages cause cancer just like smoking." Naturally, this sparked a wave of panic and confusion. People started ditching their processed meats and eyeing their favorite dishes with suspicion. But, as is often the case with sensational news, the devil was in the details, and the most crucial detail was completely overlooked. But here's the first and most crucial point. This classification reflects scientists' confidence in the existence of a link, not the strength of that link. Let me reiterate, because this is absolutely critical. We're talking about the quality of the evidence, not the magnitude of the risk involved. It's not some kind of 1 to 10 danger rating. Let me explain with a simple example. Imagine two things that could potentially harm you: tripping over a stone on the sidewalk or getting hit by a speeding truck. We have undeniable evidence that both can cause injury. So, in our hypothetical risk classification, both the stone and the truck would fall into Group 1, categorized as proven to cause injury. But you'd agree, the severity of potential injuries and the likelihood of each event are absolutely incomparable. It's exactly the same principle here. Scientists are confident there's a link between processed meat and cancer. However, that absolutely does not mean the link is anywhere near as strong as the one between smoking and cancer. To put it simply, yes, there's a risk, but it's nowhere near as immense as with tobacco. Comparing them would be like equating a minor scratch with a severe fracture. And that ultimately was the most important takeaway from that report. But what about regular, unprocessed red meat? We're talking about your steaks, chops, or even a simple roast. The agency placed it in Group 2A. This category is labeled probably carcinogenic to humans. Doesn't sound quite as alarming as proven, does it? So, what does this practically translate to? It means scientists have some data suggesting a potential link between consuming red meat and cancer. Primarily this refers to colorectal cancer, but there's also mention of a possible link to pancreatic and prostate cancer. However, according to the committee, this data isn't sufficient yet to draw a definitive 100% conclusion, unlike with processed meat. To put it simply, the evidence exists, but it's limited. It's possible that other factors, which scientists couldn't fully account for, influence the study results. That's why the verdict here is more cautious. Probably, possibly, there's reason to believe. It's not a 100% certainty, but rather a serious suspicion that warrants further investigation. So, from a scientific perspective, a fresh cut of meat and processed sausage are in completely different risk categories. Let's take a closer look inside meat. What could possibly be an issue there? Our primary suspect is heme iron. This is a unique form of iron found exclusively in animal products, and it's what gives meat its characteristic red color. Our bodies absorb it exceptionally well, which on one hand is great. It effectively helps combat anemia. However, there's a flip side to this. In the gut, heme iron can contribute to the formation of what are called N-nitroso compounds. These substances are known for their ability to damage the cells lining our intestinal walls. When such damage occurs regularly, these cells are forced into constant division and repair. And the more frequently cells divide, the higher the chance that an error, a mutation, will occur during that process, which could be the initial trigger for a cancerous tumor. So the very component that makes meat a beneficial source of iron can, under certain conditions within our bodies, initiate some rather unwelcome chemical reactions. This is one of the key mechanisms scientists point to when discussing the potential risks and downsides of red meat. Next, let's talk about nitrites and nitrates. You've likely seen these names on the labels of processed meats, like sausages and deli products. They're not just added to processed meats for no reason. In fact, they serve several crucial functions. First, they act as powerful preservatives, preventing the growth of dangerous bacteria, including the one that causes botulism. Secondly, they're responsible for that appealing pink color and distinctive meaty flavor we associate with ham and sausages. Without sodium nitrite, for example, cooked sausage would look an unappetizing gray. Here's the catch. Once inside our bodies, especially in the acidic environment of the stomach, these nitrites can transform into those very N-nitroso compounds we've already mentioned. And this process is significantly accelerated when the meat is subjected to high heat. So, when we fry up some bacon or sausages, we're not just getting a delicious meal, we're also inadvertently creating more of these carcinogenic substances within the food itself. This means that a component added for the product's safety and appeal ironically becomes the primary source of its potential danger. And this is precisely why processed meat has been classified into the highest risk group of carcinogens. It essentially comes with the precursors for harmful substances already built in. The third threat arises during cooking, that delicious crispy crust you love on your steak. Sadly, that's where the danger lurks. When meat is cooked at high temperatures, think pan frying or roasting until it's beautifully browned, the amino acids, creatine, and sugars within it start to react. This process creates chemical compounds called heterocyclic amines, or HCAs for short. Research indicates these substances are mutagenic, meaning they can cause changes to cell DNA. As we know, that's a direct pathway to an increased risk of cancer. The hotter the cooking temperature, and the longer the meat is exposed to it, the more of these harmful compounds are produced. Therefore, a well-done steak, with its dark, almost charred crust, will contain far more heterocyclic amines than a rare steak, or meat prepared by steaming or boiling. It's a strange paradox. By trying to make our food look more appetizing, we could inadvertently be increasing its potential harm. This is a crucial point, applying not just to red meat, but also to poultry and fish cooked using similar high-heat methods. When you're grilling over an open flame or charcoal, heterocyclic amines aren't your only concern. Another unwelcome guest joins the party. Meet polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs. The name sounds complicated, but you're probably familiar with how they form. When fat from the meat drips onto hot coals or an open flame, It creates smoke. That delicious, smoky aroma we love so much in grilled food. That's where peons are found. The smoke then envelops the meat, allowing these harmful substances to settle on its surface. What's more, PAHs can also form directly on the meat itself, particularly where it touches the flame and chars. These substances are also known carcinogens, the same compounds found in things like tobacco smoke and car exhaust. So, cooking over an open flame is essentially a double whammy. You're getting heterocyclic amines from the high heat and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons from the smoke and direct flame contact. Now, this doesn't mean you need to give up grilling forever, but it does explain why scientists so strongly recommend avoiding charred, burnt parts of meat and suggest moderation when enjoying foods cooked this way. Okay, so the chemistry part makes sense. But let's get down to the numbers. How much does the risk really go up? Because that's what's on everyone's mind. And here, the data is quite specific. According to findings from the International Agency for Research on Cancer, eating 50 grams of processed meat every day increases your risk of colorectal cancer by approximately 18%. What does 50 grams actually look like? That's roughly 1 sausage, 2 slices of bacon, or a couple of slices of ham. Sounds pretty alarming, doesn't it? It certainly feels like a very significant jump. As for unprocessed red meat, the figures are a little different. Consuming 100 grams of red meat per day is estimated to increase the risk by 17%. These figures, 17% and 18%, were the bombshell that exploded across the news. They sound very substantial and definitely make you seriously consider your diet. But before we start panicking and throwing all the meat out of the fridge, we need to understand what actually lies behind these percentages. And here's another very important nuance. Let's dive into a crucial concept: relative risk versus absolute risk. The difference is profound. For the average person, the absolute lifetime risk of developing colorectal cancer is about 5%. This means, on average, 5 out of every 100 people will get it, whether they eat meat or not. Now let's look at that 18% relative risk associated with processed meat. It's crucial to understand that this 18% isn't calculated from a baseline of 100%, but rather from that initial 5% absolute risk. When you do the math, 18% of 5% is roughly 0.9%. So, what does this mean? It means that consuming 50 grams of processed meat daily increases your absolute risk from 5% to approximately 5.9%. So instead of 5 out of 100 people getting the disease, we're now talking about nearly 6 out of 100. Yes, the risk has indeed increased. That's undeniable. But you have to admit the picture isn't quite as apocalyptic as it might have initially seemed. Going from 5 chances in 100 to 6 chances in 100 is a far cry from a guaranteed diagnosis. Grasping the distinction between relative and absolute risk completely reshapes how we view these issues and helps us avoid unwarranted panic. But there's another crucial issue. Most research on this topic is observational. What exactly does that mean? Typically, scientists gather a large group of people, have them fill out detailed dietary questionnaires, and then monitor their health over many years. Following this, they analyze whether there's a connection between consuming specific foods and the onset of diseases. On the surface, this sounds quite logical, but here's the inherent problem. Such studies, however, cannot definitively prove cause and effect. They merely demonstrate correlation, an association, or a relationship between factors. For instance, these studies frequently reveal that individuals consuming high amounts of red and processed meats often also tend to smoke more, drink more alcohol, eat fewer fruits and vegetables, and generally lead less healthy lifestyles overall. This leads us to the critical question: what precisely caused the illness? Was it that extra slice of processed meat, or the cigarettes smoked after dinner, or perhaps a chronic lack of fiber in their diet? Under such conditions, it becomes virtually impossible to isolate one factor from another. While researchers do attempt to adjust for these confounding variables, completely eliminating their influence is simply not feasible. It's akin to trying to pinpoint why a car is moving slowly. Is it due to a flat tire, or is the driver constantly pressing the brake pedal? Does the quality of meat truly matter? Absolutely. Let's consider two hypothetical cows. One spent its entire life grazing on lush green pastures, eating fresh grass, and getting plenty of exercise. The other was confined to a stall, fed a diet of grain, soy, and various additives designed for rapid growth. The meat from these two animals would be vastly different, not only in taste, but also in nutritional composition. Grass-fed meat, for example, typically boasts higher levels of beneficial omega-3 fatty acids, vitamins A and E, and various antioxidants. Its omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acid ratio is also more balanced, a factor widely considered more beneficial for human health, potentially reducing inflammatory processes in the body. Conversely, conventionally raised or industrially produced meat might contain residues of antibiotics and growth hormones if these were used in the farming process. While many large-scale studies face challenges in differentiating between these types of meat due to data collection complexities, a broad consensus among nutrition experts is that the initial quality of the product makes a profound difference. By choosing meat from animals raised in more natural conditions, you are likely reducing potential health risks. When it comes to your personal health risks, your cooking method is key. We've previously discussed the harmful substances that can form during frying and grilling. So, what's the solution? Does this mean you should only boil your meat from now on? Not at all, but a few simple adjustments can make your meals much safer. First, avoid direct contact between meat and open flame, and try not to let it char. If a part does get burnt, simply trim it away. Second, flip your meat more frequently while cooking. This helps minimize the formation of heterocyclic amines. Third, consider marinating your meat beforehand. Research shows that marinades made with ingredients like vinegar, lemon juice, herbs, and spices, such as rosemary or turmeric, can significantly reduce carcinogen formation. Finally, explore gentler cooking methods. Braising, slow roasting, steaming, or sous vide are all excellent alternatives to aggressive frying or grilling. The cooking method you choose is a powerful lever entirely within your control, offering a potent tool for managing these risks. Here's the good news. The right food combinations on your plate can significantly reduce risks. Your body isn't just a test tube where chemical reactions happen. It's a complex system, and what you eat alongside your meat makes a huge difference. Key allies in combating potential harm are vegetables, especially those from the cruciferous family. Broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, and cabbage are all rich in compounds that help our bodies neutralize and eliminate carcinogens. The antioxidants found in vibrant fruits, vegetables, and berries also play a vital role, shielding cells from damage. Consider your dinner plate. It's one thing to have a solitary steak with a side of fries. It's quite another to have that same steak accompanied by a large salad of fresh greens, tomatoes, bell peppers, and a serving of steamed or roasted broccoli. In the latter scenario, you're not just boosting your vitamin intake, you're actively helping your body deal with potential negative consequences. Thus, the age-old advice to eat your meat with vegetables isn't merely about achieving balance. It's a scientifically proven strategy for risk reduction. Genetics also plays a crucial role. We're all unique, and our bodies respond differently to the same foods. Some of us are more vulnerable than others. This is linked to our enzyme systems responsible for detoxification, the process of neutralizing and eliminating harmful substances from our bodies. For some, these systems work like clockwork, swiftly and efficiently neutralizing potential carcinogens from grilled or pan-fried meats. Others, however, have systems that are naturally slower or less active. All else being equal, such individuals will accumulate more harmful compounds, putting them at a higher risk. Furthermore, there are hereditary syndromes that significantly increase the predisposition to certain types of cancer. For instance, colorectal cancer. For individuals with such a genetic history, recommendations for limiting red meat will be much more stringent. Unfortunately, most of us aren't aware of all the intricacies of our own genome's function. However, if there's a history of cancer in your family, that's a compelling reason to approach your diet with particular care. Let's put this into perspective. Are the risks from bacon and the risks from smoking truly comparable? We've already established that a direct comparison isn't quite right. But to help you truly grasp the difference in scale, let's consult the figures from the World Cancer Research Fund. So, we know that excessive consumption of processed meat can increase the risk of bowel cancer. However, this type of cancer accounts for only about 3% of all diet-related cancers. Now here's a crucial point. According to the World Health Organization, tobacco smoking is responsible for roughly 22% of all cancer deaths globally. 22%. That encompasses lung cancer, throat, mouth, esophagus, bladder, and many other organs. The disparity in scale is absolutely massive. Quitting smoking is the single most powerful action you can take to drastically reduce your cancer risk. While cutting back on processed meats like sausages is certainly a healthy step, its influence on overall cancer statistics is simply in a different league. To equate these two factors is a serious misrepresentation of reality, diverting attention from a genuinely major threat to a comparatively minor one. So, what's the final verdict? Years after that widely publicized report, what did the scientific community ultimately conclude? The conclusion, it turns out, is a measured and calm one, completely free of panic. Most reputable health organizations worldwide, including the American Cancer Society and the World Cancer Research Fund, are not advocating for a complete elimination of red meat. Their recommendations generally state, limit your intake of red and processed meats. The key word here is limit, not eliminate. They advise eating no more than 350 to 500 grams of red meat per week. That's roughly 3 moderate servings. As for processed meats, they recommend consuming them as rarely as possible, or ideally, avoiding them altogether. In other words, science isn't writing off steaks and barbecues. It simply calls for moderation. The emphasis has shifted from outright prohibition to sensible consumption. The idea is for plant-based foods to form the foundation of your diet: vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and legumes. Meat, then, would serve as a complement, rather than the main dish on your plate every day. This is a balanced approach that acknowledges both the potential risks and the nutritional value of meat. And now, for the real kicker, the biggest misconception hidden behind all those dramatic headlines. Remember how processed meat was grouped with plutonium and smoking? It's true, but this classification refers to the certainty that harm exists, not the want magnitude moins of that harm. Imagine a danger scale from 1 to 100. Smoking would be around a 90 on that scale, while eating 50 grams of bacon daily might be at a 5 or 6. But scientists are 100% certain that neither is absolutely safe. That's what Group 1 means. They are equally certain that a link exists, but the strength of that link is vastly different. Comparing the risk from a sausage to the risk from a cigarette is like comparing a scratch from a kitten to a tiger attack, just because both are technically animal-related injuries. It was this misunderstanding, or misrepresentation, that caused all the panic. So what's the bottom line? Yes, a link between excessive consumption of red and especially processed meat and an increased risk of cancer does exist. Science confirms this. But this risk isn't nearly as massive as it was made out to be. It's far lower than the risks associated with smoking, heavy alcohol consumption, or obesity. The main takeaway is moderation and mindfulness. A few servings of red meat a week, prepared gently and accompanied by plenty of vegetables, is not a death sentence. However, daily processed meat sandwiches and burnt to a crisp bacon, now that's something worth thinking about. Thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. I hope you now have more clarity than fear. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new deep dives into important topics. Now, a question for you. How do you feel about red meat? Has your perspective changed after watching this? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's discuss.